All right, we are ready for lesson 2 of unit 5, Lists Investigate. To warm up, let's think about the following questions. What are some similarities and differences between lists and variables? We've been working with variables for quite a while. We know that we can store one piece of information at any given time in a variable. We can concatenate several different pieces of information and put them all together and store that in a variable. But the difference is that you can never then go back and refer to just one piece or another of that information. You can't ever break it apart again. Once you've concatenated it and put it in the variable, it's still one piece of information. And with a list, we can now store many different pieces of information, as many as we want to. And then at any given time, we can then refer to one item or another. We can add things, we can remove things, and we can change them as needed. So how does this manage complexity in a program? Think about if you were to make a program that was going to store all the names of your classmates. You might naturally think that I'm going to need to create a variable to store each one of my classmates' names. I'm going to have student 1 variable, student 2 variable, student 3 variable, so that at any given time I can refer to a certain student and collect their name or some other piece of information about them. A list manages that complexity by putting all of it together into a big long list. We can have each individual name of each individual student stored in that list. And at any given time, we can refer to just one student, or a student moves away, we can just take them out of the list. Another student moves in, we can add them to the list. And so we still only need to refer to it usually though by the name of the list, classmates, or whatever we choose. And therefore it is less complex than actually creating 20 different variables called student 1 through student 20 just to store different pieces of information about our students. The first thing that you're going to do is go to code.org, and on Bubble 1, you're going to watch the short video. I think it's only like 1 minute, 19 seconds. I want you to pause my video, go watch that video on code.org, and then come back here, and we're going to work through bubbles 2 and 3 together. Out of this. Exit. There we go. Okay. Here we are at bubble 2. Hopefully you're ready for this. Move myself out of the way a little bit. The first thing anytime that you want to do this is to go ahead and run that program and just click around on all the buttons and see what happens. You can see that you can move to the right or the left. You can choose different tops. You can choose different bottoms. But once you get to the end, it kind of just stops moving, or it should. I think I forgot to start over. Whoops, ignore that. Yes, let's try that again. Once you get to the end, it stops moving. That's what it should do for you. Or once you go back to the beginning, it stops moving, which is the way that this program is meant to be. Let's take a little bit of a look under the hood, so to speak, and see what's going on with this code. And I've moved mine to blocks mode just so that we can kind of identify those different pieces of information, like our functions, which are green, and our variables, which are purple, to be able to kind of tell a little bit better what's going on. We've got 2 lists created at the very beginning. They are empty currently, but you can tell that they're a list because they've got the square brackets. And currently there's nothing in between the square brackets. So just like whenever we create a variable, but we don't give it a starting value, we can do the same thing with the list. Create it, but not give it any value yet. Then we have 2 other variables, and they are both set to 0, tops index and bottoms index. The next thing the computer is going to do is run a fill lists function. So let's look at what our fill lists function does. Here it is. It looks very confusing, but it's really not. It is a pending item. And when we use append item, we have two things that we need to know: what list and what item are we adding to that list. And so first of all, it's referring to the tops list, and it is giving us an image URL that's going to be added to that list. So you can add things that are extremely lengthy. It doesn't have to be just one word to a list. And so now we have one item in the tops list, which is an image. Then we're going to do the same thing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. We're going to add 6 different images to the tops list. And then we're going to do the same thing with the bottoms list. We're just simply appending items to that list. We start out by telling it what list, and then we tell it what are we adding to the list. And I believe there are also 6 items there. The next thing is an update screen function. And it is very common to run an update screen function when the program first starts, as well as inside any on events. So our update screen function is down here. Let's look at it. We have new variables inside those update screen functions. We have a current top and a current bottom. And just by the name of it, you know that probably this is going to select whatever the user wants to be the current top and the current bottom. But here's how we're telling the computer how to find that image, that particular image. Current top is getting a new value, or it's getting a starter value. And here's how we are collecting the value. I think this is a little easier to see in text mode. Tops list at, and in the square brackets is where we indicate what index do we want to find in this tops list. In this case, what's inside those square brackets is not a number, but a variable. We know it's a variable because there's no quotation marks. So we need to go find out what is tops index's value right now. Well, we look at the very beginning, tops index was set to 0. So we can evaluate this right here to a 0 and say we want to find what is in tops list at index 0. From the video, hopefully you learned that index 0 is how we identify the first item in the list. We start counting at 0 in lists. It is confusing, but it gets easier after you use it multiple times. So right here, we are just saying we want the first image in the tops list. Whatever that image is, we're going to now set that as the current top. And we're doing the same exact thing with the current bottom. So both of those are starting with the first item in the list. And that's why every time you run this program, it's starting with this first top, the yellow hoodie, and the jean shorts with a belt. And then we are setting property. I'll go back to blocks mode. Setting property, our yellow ones. What property do we, or what element do we want to set it on? The top image element, which if you go to reset, you can see that's what that's called right there. It is an image that we want to change, and we are changing it to what? That's a variable, current top. We just set the value of that variable to mean the first item, the first image in the list called tops list. And we're doing the same thing with the bottom. So here we are collecting what's the item in the list, and here we're setting those images on the screen. That's all the update screen function is doing. So when we run that at the very beginning of the program, after we fill the lists, we're just going to take the first item in the list because the indexes are currently set to 0. If I was to, where did that come from? Move these. There we go. Update the screen before I filled the lists. I would get an error because currently my lists have nothing in them. So I'm gonna, where does that thing keep coming from? Stop it. There we go. All right, let's look at the on events. We have an on event for our left button, our top, left top button, left top, oh my goodness. Left top, left bottom, right bottom. All 4 are accounted for. And remember that we always want to have on events for anything that the user might click or change that we want something to happen because of it. So looking at the top left button first, we are first going to go in and check, is the tops index greater than 0? What is tops index at this point in time? It is at 0 at the very beginning. The first time we click this button, tops index is 0. Is 0 greater than 0? No. So we are not going to do what is inside of that if statement. We're simply going to move down to the update screen function and pull in the current tops index, or the current top, the current bottom, which is still the first one, and set those on the screen. That's if we click the left button. So if you can see, I'm clicking the left button at the beginning of this program, and it's not doing anything on the screen because I am at the beginning of my list. I can't go any further. If I look at the right top button, no, right, oh my goodness, where am I? Right top button, there we go. So this one right here, when I click that one, I'm going to check, is my tops index less than tops list.length -1? Say that 5 times real fast. This is a common thing that we will see a lot. List.length -1 is just a way to access the last index in the list. We're first checking our tops list.length. That little purple bubble is just asking for how many items are in that list. If there are 6 items in the list, we want to subtract 1. Now we are talking about the number 5, and that is the last index. We start counting at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 6 items, but our last index is 5, not 6. So this right here is just a complicated way of finding out what's our last index. If we are less than that last number, then we will do what? Meaning if we still have more shirts to see, that's what this is checking for, then tops index is going to increase by 1. Now tops index is 1. We'll update the screen. Let's go down here. Current top is tops list at index 1 this time. Tops index is now 1. So we are going to go to tops list, which is blank up there, and check for index 1, which is the second item in the list. Current bottom hasn't changed. So we are only affecting the top. And then we're setting the property of the current bottom and top. That's why when we go to the right, the top changes, but the bottom one doesn't. The bottom ones work exactly the same way, but let's look at what else we need to see here. It's saying, okay, first of all, why does this program use 2 lists? Why do we have a tops list and a bottoms list? Well, if you tried to have tops and bottoms in the same list, obviously you would get a crazy picture that's going to have tops on the bottom and bottoms on the top, or 2 tops, or different things like that. It just wouldn't work the way that we want the app to work. Why does this program include the variables tops index and bottoms index? What would happen if these variables were removed from the program? So this is also a very common thing that you're going to see anytime you're working with lists, is to create a separate variable for the index so that you can change the index. Like we have on line 12 here, we have subtracted 1 from the current index. Or on line 19, we're adding 1 to the current index. It's easier than trying to write code to refer to index 2. Because you're not always going to need to know index 2, or sometimes you want to go up 1 and up 1 and up 1 so that you can keep looking through the list to find a certain item or whatever. Basically, if you didn't have those, you would pretty much be stuck on the same image the whole time. What does the event handler do on lines 10 through 15, the left top button? That's the one we talked about, so we're good. What is the conditional statement? Tops index less than tops list.length minus 1 checking. So again, we're looking at how long is that list? Subtract 1 so that we know what's the last index in the list. And are we currently less than the last index in the list? So if we're at 4, do we still have more to go? Are there still more shirts to see? That's what we're checking. What would break if it was instead tops index less than tops list dot length? If it was just tops list dot length, then it would tell us 6 instead of 5. There are not 6 indices in the tops list. So this would check, say we were at 5. Is 5 less than 6? Yes. So it would attempt to go to the next item in the list, and there isn't one. So it would break at that point. Find all the places that the update screen function is called. What changes about the way the app runs if any of these calls were removed? Typically, we see the update screen function called in every single one of our on events and also at the beginning of the program. If you don't update the screen every time, then chances are you're not going to be seeing what you're expecting to see on the screen. It's always important that whenever the user has changed something, like clicked a button, changed a drop down, entered information, you're collecting that information through the on event, and then you're changing it or running it through an if statement or doing something with it before you set new information on the screen. That's just how it has to work. Edit the if statement on lines 18 through 20 so that the tops index is set to 0 if the user hits the right button when they're already at the end of the list. So this is what this is saying. Let's go to 18 through 20. So we're talking about the right top button. If I run this program right now, I go through the list of shirts and eventually I get to the end and I have no more shirts to see. So it just doesn't do anything. It just stops. But what we want it to do is loop back around to the beginning of the list whenever we get to the end. So right now we are checking, is our current index, let's say we're at index 4, is it less than tops list.length minus 1, which is 5. So 5 is the last index in that list. If that is true, then we increase by 1. So now we would be at 5. Is 5 less than 5? No. So we exit the if statement and we just update the screen, but we're just going to update it with the fifth index in both of those lists, or so we're just going to be at the end, and then every time we click on this, it's still going to say this is false and update it to the current information. What we can do is we can add an else in there. So if we are at the end, if this is false, let's do something else. In this case, we can update our variable tops index. I'm going to copy paste. It will like me today. And instead of increasing the index, we are going to go back to 0. We're just going to make it 0. The next time we run this, tops index is now less than 5. So it's going to be true and it's going to add 1. It's going to add 1 the next time. It's going to add 1 the next time until it gets to 5 again. And then it will no longer be true. So it will go down to the else and reset the index to 0. Let's see if that actually works. We go to the end. And now we go to the yellow one. So you could update all of your on events to do that every time. And that's just a simple way to do that. When you're done with that one, finish and continue. And let's look at this at number 3. This one's not quite as complicated. Why are there 2 lists in this app instead of 1? So let's look at what's going on with this one. If you haven't already played with this one, you have one option of something to click on. You click on Name My Band. Oh, that's an annoying noise. And it's giving you this random band name. Okay, so we have two lists. We have adjective list and we have noun list. They are both currently filled with pieces of information. They're currently filled with adjectives and nouns, although time is not an adjective, is it? Whatever. And then we also have two index variables again. So because we have two different lists, we're creating two different index variables so that we can independently randomize, in this case, the index that we are trying to collect from the list. We have our update screen function. Let's go look at it. Here we have three new variables being created. Our adjective variable is collecting from the adjective list the adjective index. What is the adjective index at that point? 0. So it's collecting the first item in the adjective list, which is sideways. And then noun is being updated with the value of noun list at noun index. What is the value of noun index? Currently 0. So we're going to look at noun list at index 0, which is the first item, monkeys. So this is now, forgot it already, sideways. This is now monkeys. And now we have another variable called band name where we are combining the two. We're going to refer to our variable called adjective, which we just filled with sideways. Enter a new line command. And then we have the value of our variable noun, which we just filled with monkeys. So this should read sideways, I forgot it again, sideways, new line, monkeys. And then we're going to set property, band name label, which is here in the middle, with the text of the current value of our variable called band name, which we just set to sideways, new line, monkeys. Is that what happens when I run the program? Yes, sideways monkeys. What if I do it again? It's always going to be sideways monkeys. Why? Because I start at index 0 for both lists and I run that update screen command first thing before the user gets to click the button and we run the on event. Let's look at the on event. They call it a randomize button, right? Yep, randomize button. When the user clicks that, we are going to update noun index. See, here is where we declared those two variables. We're going to update noun index with a random number between 0 and noun list.length -1. Again, it's really catchy. This just means the last index in the list. Noun list.length 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 should indicate 7, but we subtract 1 so that we are talking about 6, the last item in the list. 0, we start with 0 when we're counting them. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the last index in the noun list. So a random number between 0 and 6, and then that is going to update the noun index so that later in the update screen function, when we are updating the variable noun, noun index is now some random number between 0 and 6. And every time we run the update screen function, which will happen every time the user clicks on the randomize button, we're selecting some different index in the noun list. So it's that's how it's randomizing where it's getting the information from that list. Next, it's doing the exact same thing with the adjective index. It's going to collect how many items are in that list. Let's subtract 1 so that we know what's the last index. And we're going to choose a random number between 0 and that number. Move down here to the update screen function and find that item in that list and update the band name and then put it on the screen. Let's look at any of the questions that we need to answer here. Why are there 2 lists instead of 1? Well, we want to have a more unique experience for our user. We want there to be a random adjective and a random noun, and just to make it more interesting. So we have to store those two pieces of information separately in separate lists. Why is Sideways Monkeys always the first band name shown? I already answered that for you. What would break if this line read random number at 0 and noun list.length? Remember, noun list.length is just going to ask how many items are in the list. And when we count items, we count starting at 1. So it was 7. And we don't have an index of 7. So that would break the computer because, well, you know, not really break, but whenever we would choose a random number, it's possible that 7 would be our random number. And then in the update screen function, we try to access the noun list at index 7, and there isn't one. So it would give us some sort of an error. What is the function doing in line 17 through 20? We went over that already. Okay, here's what it wants you to do. Add more words to nouns list, and adjectives list. So we can do that in a couple of different ways. You can physically go here to the list and hit the little arrow and then type in quotation marks, of course, a new adjective. And then do the same thing with your nouns. Or you can go to your variables toolbox and we have some new things here. We have our append item function. Command, let's call it a command. We have to tell it what list do we want to append this item to. So I'm going to copy paste there. And then we have to tell it what we want to add to the list. So in this case, adjective, I'm not thinking of very creative things here. And then now those things are added to the list, and anytime I'm going to refer to noun list.length, it will include that item that I added. All right, finish and continue. There is now another video on Bubble 4 that you need to watch independently. So stop my video, watch that video, come back when you're done. All right, ready for Bubble 5. So we have a pair maker app. If you run this, you can see what it does right now. We've got people, you, me, another person. I can add people, right? Kathy, she's now on my list. Tori is on my list. Kevin is on my list. I can, this is updated automatically as I go along. I can take someone out of my list and they are no longer here. They are no longer here. I can assign a random pair that's just going to collect 2 random people out of that list and put them down here. And also, they are no longer in my list. If I assign a random pair again, it takes 2 more people out of my list. And then if I try to assign a random pair again, it tells me I need to add more people to make a pair. I only have 1 person. So there's quite a bit of stuff going on behind the scenes here. Let's see what we need to do first. Let's look at the code just a little bit. We've got a list that starts out with 3 things in it. People list, and it currently has you, me, and another person when you first start the program. And then it updates the screen, very common. So our update screen function is right here. We're going to set the people label, which is here, text to peoplelist.join, and in parentheses, we have a new line command. So the first question is, what does .join do? If you run this program, you can see that on the people label, the text that shows up is everything that is in the people list, but it is joined together. And what's in between each thing is a new line command. So it takes everything in the list, puts it all together with whatever you want to do to space them out. You could put commas. You could put just a space. In this case, we put a new line command. So then we have a people drop down. that is allowing us to change the options of the people dropdown with the people list. So whenever we update the screen, we're going to add all the things in the list here, and we're going to add all the people to our dropdown. That's what the update screen function is doing. Cool, cool things. Let's move down to this one. This line of code references an index property of a dropdown, line 1819. Let's go to that one, the remove person button. Go look at what that property does in design mode, then describe how these lines of code work together to remove a user from the list of partners. So let's look closer at the remove person button. When they click remove, it's going to give us some information of, sorry, what is the word? Add a starter value to the variable called person index. We're going to get property. We can get property now instead of just get text and get number from people dropdown, and we want to get the index. So let's look at design mode and look at that dropdown. People dropdown. It has an index of -1. So we're going to get that index of -1. And now it is the person index. -1 is what's in there. We're going to remove item people list at index -1. So right now, that doesn't even make sense. What else do we need to know? Because that doesn't make sense. Let's move. Okay, so people index would start at 0. This would be index 0. We don't have a -1. Have we updated an index somewhere? That's the first time we're even talking about an index. Get property index. Remove item. People list at index -1. Well, let's click the remove. It removed somebody. U is the first one that shows up. Remove. And it removed U. Let's come back to that. I don't get it yet. All right, let's look at our add person button. We have a new variable called new person. We're going to get text from the person input. So right here, whatever the user has entered into that box is now what we have in new person variable. We're going to insert item to our people list at index 0, and we're going to add that new person. So at index 0 means we're going to put them at the beginning and then scoot everybody else down. So you can see that here, that whenever I type in a new person, they go to the beginning of the list. They also go to the beginning of the list here. That's how that works in practice. And then we're going to set property, person input, text. And where's the person input? This one. We're going to set it to an empty string. So we want that to 0 out. We want it to clear out after you have clicked the add button. Then we will update the screen, which will update the people label and the people dropdown with the current contents of the list. Let's look at our random assign button. I'm still confused by this whole thing right here. How could it be taking a -1 and actually doing something with it? Am I missing something? Usually, I can't change that. Should it be 0? Maybe it's -1 because there's nothing there. What if I add something there? Hey, now there's an index 0. Okay, that makes sense to me now. Let's go back to that one. Remove person button. So when I run this program, I have a list and my update screen function is, where did it go? Is putting items in the people list, in the dropdown. It's putting stuff there. So when I first run this program, I have 0, 1, and 2 indexes filled in that list. So when I use the remove person, I'm going to collect the index of whichever person I'm selecting in the dropdown. And then I'm going to remove that item at that index. I hope that made sense to you. It finally made sense to me. Okay, random assign button. Let's look at this one. If people list.length, so we're going to check how many things are in that list. Right now it's 3, is greater than or equal to 2. It is. So let's see what the computer wants us to do. We are going to create some new variables. Random index 1 is going to take a random number of 0 to however many items are in, or the last index in the people list. Random person number 1 is going to take that random number and locate that index in the people list. So we're collecting now. Here we've randomized where in the list we're going to look. Here we're collecting that person's name and putting it here. And now we're going to remove them from the people list. If the length of the list is greater than or equal to 2. Remember, this is our random assign button. This is our assigning a random pair. So we're taking a random person and we're removing them from the list, but they still currently exist in the variable called random person 1. Then we're doing the same thing with a separate person. We're going to take a random number in the people list. We're going to grab a person at that index and assign them to random person 2. We're going to remove them from the list. But then we're going to set property pair label. That's this down here with the text that includes random person 1 and random person 2. So we took them out of the list, but then we're going to put their names on the screen, and that's all we're doing with them. If we do not have at least 2 people in the list, then it's going to go down to the else, which is going to set the text of add more people to make a pair. And we experienced that when it happened. And then it's going to update the screen, which again, just goes to add the current people who are still in the list up here and on the drop down. A lot of things going on with that one. Aren't you glad you didn't have to write it? Why does the conditional read people list.length greater than or equal to 2? Would it break if it read people list.length greater than or equal to 1 instead? And so we just talked about that one, that there has to be at least 2 people in the list if we are going to pair them. If there's only 1, they can't be a pair. What would happen if you switch the order of lines 26 and 27? Let's look at those. 26 is finding the random person number 1. 27 is removing that person. Okay, so if we moved that right there, we would collect a random number based on how many items are in the list. We would go to people list and we would remove that item in the list. Then we're going to go and try to find who it was. So that's why you cannot swap those two. We need to find out who they are and store that in a separate variable before we remove them from the list. Otherwise, we couldn't set the property on the screen with line 33. You probably could put this remove item, where did that even come from? Stop it. Put this remove item down here instead. And I don't think that that would affect your functionality at all. Oh, it's giving me a, apparently it does. I don't know why. I'm too tired to think about it right now, honestly. change the default names that are available when this app starts running. So you were going to do that. The easiest way to do that would be to do it right here and just change it to something else. I love it when it won't. There we go. So you just change them right there. Update this app to pick groups of 3 rather than groups of 2. So let's find out where it is collecting groups right here. And we would have to make sure that we have at least 3 people in our group. So that's the first thing we would change is on line 24. We are currently grabbing 1 random person, a second random person. And so if we wanted this to have 3 random people, we're pretty much just going to take these lines and duplicate them. So I'm going to do a Control C, move down, Control V, and then change things. Now I have to call this something different. I'm going to call it random index 3, random person 3. This also has to be random index 3 and random index 3 here. And then on my concatenation here on line 36, I'm going to go to text mode to add. And just another plus sign there and random person 3. And let's make sure that that works. I think it should. Also, it's not a pair. It's, let's call it a trio. Add more people to make a trio. And then let's reset and run. I have Tom, Dick, and Harry. I do have 3 people, so it should give me, except I would need to go to design mode and change what that says on the button. I'm not going to do that. Harry and Dick, Tom. Okay. I also need to say the word and in between those 2, duh. So right here, space, end quotes, another plus. Plus is in between anything that we're trying to combine together. Now let's see if it works. Tom and Dick and Harry. Okay, that works. If I now, let's add a person and then see if it should not run. Add more people to make a trio. That works. Is that the last thing? It was. Online or on bubble 6, it's just kind of going over this random list access pattern. So this is something that will be available to you as you go forth and create more apps that use some randomization of accessing a list in different ways. You've got your variable that is an index of some sort. You've got your variable that is a list, so that when you click your on of it, you click your button or whatever, you're going to update the variable list, or sorry, index with some random number. And you're going to basically do this word for word, except you're going to change what the name of the element is, what the name of the list is, and that's about it. And then you go to your update screen function where you're physically adding that information to the screen. On bubble 7, here is a list scrolling pattern. It does not like to be at that magnification. List scrolling pattern. So here is like the outfit choices that I want to scroll through different items in the list. I'm not even going to go over that right now, but what I want you to know is that you should now have access to it in your bubbles under this help and tips section. It's not showing up yet. It probably will in tomorrow's lesson. It'll be under help and tips, and it'll even say random list scrolling pattern, and you can refer to it so that next time you're creating some app where you're accessing a list, you can go and look at that pattern and see how to set up the basic elements of it, hopefully without my help. If you have any questions, feel free to email me.